Good morning, my friends. Welcome to this way of being present at the High Mountain Presbyterian Church. I'm Pastor Lou Kilgore, pastor here at the High Mountain Presbyterian Church. Location of this campus is in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey, and we are one church on two campuses. We have another campus in North Haledon, New Jersey, where we run our preschool and infant care center. That is a ministry of the church. It's run by the church. I'm the director. It does have a mission in that we try to respond to the need for lower cost and very good quality child care. So we are a mission taking care of and reaching out specifically to single parents raising children, low-income families who are looking for a place and a way to be able to go to work during the day and provide for their family and know that they're leaving their children in the care of people who will love them and care for them. Because that's what we're called to do as a part of the ministry of the gospel, to be a blessing to the families of the earth. And so this is a very concrete expression. I do this Bible study, reading through the Psalms, in the hopes that it will be a blessing to you as well. Some of you are at home, still sheltering in place in COVID, and I do it as an outreach to try to be able to reach that blessing into your thoughts and your heart and your mind, so that you will know that God is with you as well as with me. So, what are we doing? We are reading now what I call a plain reading of the Bible. We've been working on this project for years with a group, making our way through, and we are currently in the middle of the Psalms. So we are reading a psalm every week. The progress is slow, but sometimes the meaning is profound. And so today, we're going to read a fairly short psalm. It's Psalm 26, 12 verses. And I think it's a psalm that, I don't know, if you were looking for a place to read in the Bible, you'd probably pass over this one. You would probably not look at this because it seems so entrenched in the ancient ways of ancient Israel, and it's hard to know, how is it relevant for today? At least that was my thoughts when I first started working on it. And I'm hopeful to share with you my excitement that, I found some pretty worthy nuggets in here to think about as I live my life and try to live it in faith as well. So, let's begin with just a moment of silence, shall we? All right, I'm going to read the psalm. I'm reading from a translation from the original, so it's not quite the same as it would be if you're following along in an English version translation. It's an attempt to tie the text more to the actual ancient language, but it's still very accessible. So I invite you to listen for the reading of Psalm 26, 1 to 12. Judge me, O Lord, for I have walked in my integrity and have trusted in the Lord. I shall not slip. Examine me, O Lord, and try me. Test my kidneys and my heart. For your loving kindness is before my eyes, and I have walked constantly in your faithfulness. I have not sat with men of falsehood, nor will I consort with dissemblers. I have hated the assembly of evildoers, and I will not sit with the wicked. I will wash my hands in innocence, and I will go around your altar, O Lord, to hear the sound of praise and to recount all of your wondrous deeds. O Lord, I have loved the habitation of your house and the place where your glory dwells. Do not gather up my soul with sinners, or my life with bloodthirsty men, in whose hands is wickedness, and their right hand is full of bribes. But I shall walk in my integrity. Redeem me, and be gracious to me. My foot has stood on level ground in the assemblies of worship. I will bless the Lord. So, I want to say a couple things about the whole concept of this psalm and the concept of how is God with us. In the ancient Hebrew world, they believed that God was present with them, as Christians today still believe that God is present with us. But they also believed that there was, I'm going to use the word, a special kind of presence, a special kind of presence of God, which could be gained in first. They had tents, movable tents, that moved around with them, and it was like that was their church. And the tent was elaborate inside. It was movable, but it was elaborate, and it was called the tabernacle. And so, as much as you could have a sense that God is a personal God who is with you everywhere, there was this place that you could go. It was a place where the barrier between God, as the Celtics used to say, to the thin places where the gap between God and humans is very thin. And so in the tabernacle, you could go into the tabernacle, and part of it was the incense, the smell of the tabernacle, and it was also all of the signs and symbols of the past, of times of faithfulness of God in the past were all presented in, I'm sure, maybe in mosaics and in artwork, in all kinds of things that nudge us and remind us of God's presence. It always had a place like this. And it was originally a tent that moved around, and then when the civilization became more stable and they put foundations under houses, they built a building. It was a building, a permanent building, and it was the temple. It was a place then enormously elaborate with the signs and the symbols of God's presence in the past and God's presence, the promise of God in the future. And you would go into this place out of the ordinary rhythm of your life, because ordinary life is not always the best place to be inspired. I'm going to use that. To be inspired and strengthened in this mysterious walking through life with God. God can be found, the presence of God can be seen and sensed for human beings in ordinary life. That's one thing that I want to say today is I think that we miss that point. But also, sometimes in the ordinariness of life, we miss the specialness of God. We miss the deeper engagement. We miss the parts that make us feel small, that are overwhelming to us, that remind us that this is not just a relationship with another human being. This is a relationship with the God who created the universe. And that can sometimes be taken for granted. So in the Hebrew practice of their faith, in the living of their life, they always had a place. a place that they would go to. And in order to keep the place special, I guess that's the best word, you had to go through a kind of a ritual of peeling away the ordinariness of your life and be aware you are entering into a place of special awareness of God. So they had rituals. The priests would wait the outside, and before you could come in to the inside, to the Shekinah, to the presence of God, there were certain things that you needed to do, certain reminders that you needed to walk yourself through. You couldn't just nonchalantly just stroll in. And the reason for that was that if you just nonchalantly stroll into the space, then the space becomes as ordinary as any place else, and the reminders of the uniqueness and the wonder of God would be lost. I think, I'm going to go off a little bit on a tangent, because being a pastor of a church, I identify with people who don't want all of the pomp and circumstance related to church. They want to come in. I see signs for congregations say, come as you are, dress as you are. You don't have to dress in any particular way. You don't have to do anything. Just come and be yourself. And I love that. I welcome that sense of the accessibility of God to all people. However, I think there is a need for a balance. And I don't know how to get it in a world that doesn't want to come to church anyway. How do you get the balance that says, before you just stroll into this building, which has a pointed roof and walls, you need to do a little something to I don't know, widen your eyes and open your ears, and something that says, I know I am seeking a special awareness of God. When I was a child, you didn't come to church just dressed in regular clothes. There were church clothes, and you dressed in those church clothes. And please don't misunderstand me. I'm not the good old days. Many of those practices were off-putting, and they created a sense inside the church that these were special people, and that ordinary people just could not just stroll in here. You had to be dressed up. And then there were behaviors that were required. The behaviors initially were required. You had to sit silently. You had to know how to be silent. You needed to be prepared to stand up when you were invited to and sit down. All of these things are carryovers of this ancient tradition of this faith which we have in common, which is how are we to live this life of faith with a God we can't touch and we can't see, and we're not supposed to create graven images, stones that fix the image of God. How do you represent a relationship? How do you engage in a relationship with God? God comes to you. God comes to you where you are, where you work, in the mountains, in the fields, wherever. God is there. God is with you. The reciprocal side of that relationship is when we come to God, when we approach God. You'll hear the psalmist says, who can approach God? Who can come to God? And what's required of it? Now, I always thought that these psalms were an expression of arrogance, because many times who can approach God? Only the righteous, only the ones whose hearts are pure. And I would look around in my life and look at my own life and say, well, I can't approach God. I'm not worthy to go into God's presence. Like I am not one of those righteous people who doesn't hang out with the evil people and all that. But the commentator here has helped me to understand that what the psalmist is talking about is, he's not talking about perfect people can approach God. Perfect people can come in to the temple. He's talking about the fact, and historians will tell us there used to be basins and bowls around the outside of the temple where you would go and the priest would help you, and you would wash your hands, symbolically wash your hands as an acknowledgement that you're a sinner, you're broken, you are arrogant and you're greedy and you're all those other things that human beings so easily are and become. You are all those things, and you wash your hands as an acknowledgement that that's who you are. You're a broken human being. And this is an important part of getting in the right mindset, if you will, of getting in the right posture, of being able to, to have your sense of your relationship with God enriched. I guess that's what I wanted to say. There's something, you can't just snap your fingers and have this sense of this awareness of God and you in God's presence happen. You have to be human. You have to acknowledge who you are. It's about truth. So, that's my little speech that I think makes this whole, it's an attempt to make it relevant. The psalmist prays for divine judgment. The guy walks up to the temple and says, "Judge me, Lord." And it's not, try me, find out I'm perfect. It's, go ahead, get to know me. Look me over. I'm going to look me over. I'm going to try to do some inventory taking. I'm going to try. Saying that word inventory sparked my memory of a process that the 12-step group uses, and that is to take a fearless inventory of yourself. You ask for God to take that fearless inventory. In and of itself, that experience of taking a fearless inventory of yourself is not part of a journey to condemn you. It's part of the journey into the presence of God, because it is the basis of truth. It helps you to be grounded. And in some ways, that's as close as human beings ever get to righteousness or to pureness. That's as close as we ever get. We're not righteous and ready to enter worship because we're perfect. That would be no one. But listen, the psalmist prays for divine judgment and testing prior to admission to worship. He declares his innocence in the sense of integrity and preparation. That's an important sentence. He's innocent in terms of his integrity, his honesty, and his preparation. At some point, the commentator says that the purity that is being claimed for those who enter into worship is the same as the refiner's fire. The metal refiner heats the metal up, and all the impurities are then burned away. And so the innocence and purity that this person is claiming as they walk over the threshold of entering the temple is an innocence that is earned. It's an innocence that is gained. It's a righteousness that is gained because of the fierce fire of God's taking inventory in ourselves and our willingness to have that happen. And then all, the dross, the waste is consumed. This is an important part of this journey into the presence of God. It is not, unfortunately, it is not what it becomes, and that is that those of us who seek this relationship out are better than other people. It's just, it wasn't there in the ancient Hebrew times, and it's not here as the teaching basis of our life in our life of worship. Judge me, O Lord, for I have walked with certainty, and I shall not slip. That the prayer to be judged by God is a necessary prerequisite to entering the temple, and vis-a-vis this awareness of God and participating in worship. It presupposes the priestly questions. Who shall dwell? Who can ascend? Who is able to walk through the doors of the tabernacle or the temple? To such questions, the psalmist replies, "Judge me, O God. See if I am worthy to enter your house." The seeing is not a seeing that anticipates you're going to see that I'm clean, pure, wonderful, perfect human being. It's judge me, see me, clean me, make me ready, help me to get in there, help me to get to the place where I know that you are there. His affirmation is not of sinlessness, but only the integrity of his desire and trust as a qualification for participation in worship. Think about this now. Now, I know people who have no practice of religion, no practice of an awareness of a journey with God at all, will never understand it. But we are supposed to understand this. Our righteousness, the perfection of us has nothing to do with us, it has to do with God. I'll read this part where the commentator talks about this. This language is associated primarily with the smelting and refining of metal. God, who symbolically occupies the temple, is portrayed in the metaphor as a refiner of metal, who tests the metal and those who would enter the house to worship. But the terminology is significant in another sense. It implies not only testing, but refining and purifying. In praying to be tested, the potential worshiper affirms the integrity of their quest and is aware of the need for purification. The worshiper is integrity meaning he's honest. He's just honest in his quest. He wants to draw close. He wants to be strengthened in life with things that remind him in ways that matter of God's presence in his life, so he can lean on it, so he can be a trusting, believing person. Thus, the journey of the entrance into the temple. In positive terms, it consists in a walk of life in which there is a constant awareness of God's covenant characteristics, loving kindness and faithfulness. So what's coming out for me in all of this? The experience of God, and I don't know, maybe that's an alien thing to you. I think about it, what is the experience of God? When and how do you become aware, if you do, of God's presence? Sometimes you close your eyes and you sit in silence. Sometimes maybe it's in reading or in meditation, which is different, and purposeful, guided meditation. Maybe there are ways. In the ancient Hebrew, you needed more than that. You needed a community gathered together, and you needed the signs and powerful symbols, not just of your individual life, but of your collective life together, so they would be reminded of the Passover. They would be reminded of the great manna that came from heaven. They came into the place where the monuments were there of the great times when they needed to know beyond any shadow of a doubt that God was with them, and it happened. I mean, imagine in your life if you were, a collector of little monuments of important moments of your life. I guess photographs would be that for us today. But, suppose you had been diagnosed with cancer 25 years ago. And after 4 or 5 years of treatment and suffering and all, you were cured, and you were told you're cured. What if, because of that event, you memorialized it in something? You ask an artist friend of yours to create a little statue, a little icon, or you kept one of the breathing devices from the hospital that you depended upon so much during your stay. And you brought that and you put it up on your bookshelf, or you put it in a special room in your house, which would fit even more. And in that room, when you walked into that room, in the journey of your life would be all the reminders of the times of significant sense that God had delivered you. I remember one time, very frightening time for me in my life. I was a pastor. I had 4 children at the time. I lived in the church's house, and I needed a new job. I needed to find a new church to go to. It was a daunting task. I was scared to death. And in that time period, in a way more intense than normal, I felt that I needed to know that God was with me, that God would help me, that God was going to get me through. And indeed, I can tell you, I worked, wrote a resume, passed it around, put it out there to the world. And the whole time I had this sense that I hoped that God would be with me. And then in a way I could never have anticipated, I'm searching over in this way, and a call to a church came from over here. It came totally out of the blue and launched me in the direction of my ministry and career for many, many years. Now, I'm sitting here thinking, I don't have any memento of that. I don't have, I don't have a copy of that resume set up for visibility somewhere. But what a thing it would be if I had a room of my journey, right? A room of my life journey. And in that room of my life journey, the significant moments of my sense and awareness of God's great and powerful loving kindness and faithfulness where had been displayed. And imagine having a small room like that in your house that, I don't know, when you were worried or fearful, whatever, you could walk into that room and you could feel it wrap its arms around you, and you could feel it remind you of the things you needed most to be reminded of. And how would you approach that room? Well, you would approach it with a sense of, this is a significant room. Maybe you take your shoes off. I visited a home the other day, and a big sign on the door. I think it was probably for prevention of mud, but the sign said, "Please, everyone, take your shoes off before you enter this house." And I think that there would be some instruction like that entering into this room of faith, this room of relationship with God. I'm freewheeling here, friends. I'm spinning. And then, because what I want to say is, now imagine if that wasn't just your private room. What if it wasn't your private room? What if it was a community room? And what was celebrated there were the reminders, the artifacts or the signs and symbols that reminded you as a community of things you have experienced together, things that you have survived, you've overcome. And truthfully, that's kind of what sanctuaries like this church sanctuary, how they have functioned, whether intentionally or not. Inside these buildings, there are baptismal fonts, there are symbols on the wall, places we remember that we sat, and then while we're here, we tell the story of God's faithfulness and God's covenant in our lives. When we do it right, we come into this place, whatever it is, with a sense of reverence. We don't take our shoes off. Again, I'm not sure that wouldn't be a bad idea. But we do have a kind of shared sense that this place requires a special kind of behavior, and that it should not be treated lightly. It should not be just the ordinariness. Maybe we come in, and for the first time in our lives, we're quiet. We come in, we sit down, and we're in a group of people, but we're quiet. All of that is rehearsed in this ritual and in this psalm of what's going on with the psalmist. And I wanted to read this. The psalmist, in the ancient Hebrew faith, the greatest danger related to this experience of the sanctuary or of the temple. Listen to this. The greatest fundamental danger was that of familiarity, to be too familiar with it, which in turn could lead to a casual approach to worship from which hypocritical and superficial attitudes could emerge. I don't know if that means to you what it means to me. There is a danger in, even if it was in your own personal shrine, if you want to, in your house, to your relationship with God, but especially in the community gathering place. Listen to me, what an old fundamentalist I am. That the fundamental danger was that of familiarity. You would treat the space and the symbols and the place with so much familiarity that it could lead to a casual approach to the whole event, so that inside that place is no different than outside of that place. And when that happens, the things that you do inside make you a hypocrite and only just build superficial attitudes. In the scriptures, there clearly were times when God came to a particular person in what's called a theophany. God would go where they were, and the bush would burn with Moses, and there would be overwhelming sense of God has come to meet me there. But in the temple, in entering into these places, these special places, the greatest risk was the danger of becoming too familiar with it. I'm going to read this part again. The preparations for entering the temple, such as those reflected in the psalm, the washing of the hands, the praying, God, search me, know me, get to know my heart, find the things, impurities in me, and redeem them with me. Remind me that I'm not the kind of guy that wants to be hanging out with people who formulate bribes and get through life by taking shortcuts. All this ritual of self-examination, the inventory taking, helps to make what happens inside more special and also full of more integrity. There must always be a double focus in preparation. The one is the reason we do this is because of the wonder, the magnificence, the awesomeness of being in the presence of God, and the basic unworthiness of the worshiper to enter into that divine presence. Reflecting on God's wonder and glory and magnificence, the worshiper is made aware of unworthiness. But reflecting on that unworthiness, the worshiper becomes aware of the need for forgiveness and mercy, for moral integrity and spiritual faithfulness, which then opens the door and propels him into the place of God. The worshiper must also pray with the same humility and expectation. Redeem me, O God, and be gracious unto me. Only then can we proceed into the divine presence and truly participate in the benefits of worship for strengthening our faith. Well, I hope I was able to bring you along in the journey. I don't know, sometimes I sit and read in my own and work on this, and I get so excited about it, then I'm not always sure that I can bring you in. But behind all of this, what I hear is this incredible importance of having a place. You know, the culture we live in today says, I don't need to go to church. And there's something in me that says, you're right. But now there's something in me that says that's not exactly right. Because in the casualness of our lives, in the too casualness, and this is true not only in relationship to God, it's also true in relationship to each other. Relationships need specialness. They need special focus. They need, and they don't just need special focus of the individual, they need the special focus of a community. This is why when a person's birthday is celebrated, we bring people in together. Relationships need special focus. And especially the magnanimous, the unimaginable sense of our own faith story, which is the God of the universe is available, ready, and interested in relationship. How do you nurture that relationship? With specialness. This song, a prayer, an approach of specialness that says, this is how I prepare to enter into a place where I believe that my trust and my faith in God will be nurtured and where it will be strengthened. I find that when I enter into places of worship. I do. And I'm not just talking about the sermons or the hymns. I find it in approaching. I find it in walking in. And I'm grateful still that there are places like this and like the many other places in the world where I can go. And it invites that fearless inventory of myself as I go in. I pray to God for the refining work of purifying me. And then I'm surrounded by, especially churches with stained glass windows, the powerful stories of God's faithfulness in the past and my own reminders of God's faithfulness to me in my life as I've lived it. And that then begins to infill the well of my life. By the way, I didn't talk about the psalmist prays for God to strengthen his kidneys. In the ancient anatomy, the center of our emotions were thought to be in the kidneys. The center of our thoughts and our rationality was thought to be in the heart. The heart was where you think, and the kidneys are where you feel. Just going back and picking up that loose end. Okay, God bless you, my friends, and may God bless you into many different places and ways of an entrance into an awareness of God's love and grace and faithfulness for you in your life. That's all for this week. I'll be back next week to share again another psalm for the journey of our lives. God bless you, my friends.